All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start recording. All right, welcome back. This is the second time we have to do this, but it is currently 6:07 p.m. Central Time, Friday, March 28th. Dylan, how are you doing, my man? Making a
Hey,
reappearance on the show.
we got to the end of the week. We spent a little time together the other day, and we're doing it again. But when you've got mildly good news, I think it's worth talking about.
I'm Ron Burgundy. That's what that sounded like. I'm Ron Burgundy. Yeah. So what we're alluding to is we did a podcast earlier in the week in regards to West Virginia hiring its new men's basketball coach, and for whatever reason, Skype didn't want to download it, and we could have done Skype again, but it's going away in May, I think, and we were like, you know what, we're gonna have to find another way. Might as well figure it out. So we're trying Zoom now. Um, so anyway, the breaking news that finally happened is West Virginia hires a new men's basketball coach in Ross Hodge, not Alvin, like I almost wanted to call him last week. Ross Hodge from North Texas. And Dylan, I want to know your thoughts. I know your thoughts, but I want to know your thoughts.
I think that this is one of those, if you deep dive it and are very analytically inclined, you feel pretty good about it. But if you're just your casual, run-of-the-mill fan base kind of member, you're probably wondering who in the hell this guy is. How deep at the bottom of the barrel was Ren Baker scraping to find this guy? Because after the situation with nickname to be determined, public enemy number one, DeVries, that, okay, like we've got all this money from Indiana coming in. They're going to take care of everything. He's like, oh, Ren Baker's line was, your search expands when you have this kind of buyout money to play with because you can go after a bigger fish. And then you end up, and that's where I think some of the fan base got frustrated with that kind of lead up of like, who can we take? And then you end up with, arguably a good coach, but from North Texas. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we quintupled his salary, which is great for him. And I think, could very easily be worth it in the next year, maybe two. But it's not a name that's going to excite the fan base that doesn't deep dive it.
Yeah, it felt like this search began with a trio, and whether or not Hodge was part of that trio, I don't really know. And I don't even know if the search began with McCollum. True, like you know what I mean. Truly began with McCollum, and I would throw Nico Medved in there. Ben McCollum is the guy who took the Iowa job. Nico Medved, the Colorado State coach, now at Minnesota. It felt like those two, and then
If you had to pick a third, it was Calhoun.
yeah, I'm not even sure I buy that.
I don't think it was either, because I know that's something that you and I've discussed and was part of our previous attempt at this was that Calhoun, I think, got the Charlotte interview that he got as kind of a pacifist, attempt by Ren Baker to get the Huggins crowd to be like, I talked to the guy, and I think both Calhoun and Baker, or just some sources that were privy to the conversation in Charlotte, that the very first 10 minutes of their discussion when Ren flew down to North Carolina to talk to him was addressing the Huggy Bear in the room.
I like
And
that.
so like that was the first thing, is that was Ren Baker's genuine, honest question that we all would have had, and our concern that we all would have had of, tell me, who am I hiring? Am I hiring Jared Calhoun that's going to run his own program, or am I hiring the puppet with the strings attached to the fingers of Bob Huggins? And I think that was the concern that a lot of us would have had, in that if Calhoun came in, like did well at Fairmont State, did well at Youngstown State to turn around two middling programs, and walked into a pretty good situation at Utah State and didn't drop the ball this year. They won 26 games, did well. Winning 26 is nothing to sneeze at in any league, really, especially the D1 level. And so I think, you had like that. That was the first concern. And I think, as I told you the other day, I don't think Ren Baker liked the answer. It may have been a genuine answer from Calhoun, but I don't think that Ren trusted that answer. And so he went back to, and Baker's an operator, as we've discussed, you and I, several times on this show, that he went back to operations he's familiar with. He knew Ross well from North Texas. Ross coming in a year after Ren Baker was hired at North Texas. So there was a familiarity there. They've clearly, like, Ren Baker knows basketball. That's where he's hung his hat on at West Virginia. Unfortunately, having to make a few different hires already, and historically done well. Hiring Ben McCollum back in the early 2000s at Northwest Missouri State, where he only turned around and won 4 national championships in 80% of his games. So, like, that's the beginning of Ren Baker's basketball hiring spree in his career. Hires Grant McCaslin and, by extension, Ross Hodge at North Texas. All they do is win the NIT, have the best years in school history at North Texas, which gets Grant McCaslin the Texas Tech job. They're only playing for a shot at the Final Four after the comeback that they had last night. So, clearly, like, McCaslin can coach well. And I think the telling thing that a lot of people, it's kind of been a marketing blitz, I think, a little bit by West Virginia's athletic department of selling the fan base on Ross Hodge. Because when DeVries got hired, you had a couple of coaches that were like, oh, this is a damn good hire. Not really happy this guy's in the Big 12. But it was like, one post the day he got hired, and the focus was on the trajectory of the program. Everybody knew it was a good hire. There's been 3 or 4 posts from West Virginia's marketing team that does a fantastic job, and we know many of the people that are making those posts, you and I, that they do a great job. And there's been 4 or 5 different posts. Like, we're reaching out to coaches across the country, anybody that's ever watched Ross Hodge's teams play, and being like, hey, this guy's good. And the one quote that wasn't sourced by West Virginia was an interview that Grant McCaslin did, I believe, about the time that you and I were attempting to record the other day.
It was 365 Sports. My brother sent me the link in the middle of our initial podcast.
Yeah, and so, but the quote from McCaslin was, I called Ren Baker and said, I'm not happy about this. What are you doing? Because he basically was saying, he's a younger, better version of me. Everywhere that they had been head coaches that was at the same place, Ross Hodge has been a few percentage points better. He's a younger version of me. He ran the defense at North Texas, which, if you want to get into the statistics and the analytics, which, I know you're a KenPom guy with the adjusted efficiency more than I am, that one of the top 2 over the past 5 to 6 seasons, top 2 scoring defense next to Kelvin Sampson in Houston.
Yeah.
If I can be on that level of defense, I think that's going to sit well with West Virginia fans in the long run.
And we're anyway, talking about Hodge, like you said, the more you dig, there's more to like. But I think we're both in agreement that this isn't a home run hire. Like last year when we hired Darren DeVries from Drake, that was a home run hire. He had been there for 6 years, I think, had built that program up, which hadn't made the tournament in a decade. And under him, they went there 3 straight years. And he comes to WVU and then becomes an asshole and leaves less than a calendar year later. And here we are now. And Hodge, and no one knows who this guy is because he's never made the tournament as a Division I head coach.
Right. Very successful run at JUCO, winning, I think it was 83% of his games. So, like, he's won at different levels. And I think that's just the concern that a lot of people have, and where it doesn't feel like a home run hire, is he's spent 2 years as a Division I coach, won 67% of his games in the NIT Final Four this coming weekend. So, like, has success, but, the expectation when DeVries was hired was, okay, let's put a roster together and we've got a second weekend team under this leadership. I think if you pulled the same people that would have told you that, coming into this season, say, how many people in the West Virginia fan base or nationally think that we're instant contenders to be playing this weekend next year? And I don't think you have as many people that say that. And I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying there's not as much confidence in Hodge to turn it around instantly.
Another thing that I like about him, we talked about his efficiency ratings, both offensively and defensively at North Texas this past year. One thing I really like about him is he's had to overhaul that roster at North Texas twice with not a lot of NIL resources. And we can't base it off this year because the portal it's began, but it hasn't really began yet. But from his first team to his second team, several of those players went on to bigger schools like Vanderbilt, St. John's, New Mexico, and have made an impact in the tournament with more well-known coaches. So, and that was a point from Chris Anderson from 24/7 Sports, who covers WVU, and he followed it up basically with sounds like he's got an eye for talent, and that more importantly, I think, other than being a cultural fit at West Virginia and what it means to be a Mountaineer and what the Mountaineers mean to the state, I think after that it becomes, do you have an eye for talent? And because West Virginia is not going to get the highly rated recruits in
Not
any
going to hit
sport.
5 stars, but I would say arguably, and this is something that not a lot of people may say, and it might be a little bit of a hot take, is that I think in the NIL era, West Virginia is slightly better positioned than we ever have been because we have a bigger war chest where like when everybody was kind of paying under the table, as I think there was kind of like a weird hesitancy with West Virginia folks to really kind of dive in and do it the way that everybody else was doing it. And like we talked the other day where the war chest that is supposedly being given Hodge is, in the neighborhood of 5 million, which is more than DeVries was given this year, albeit, son of the snake, Tucker with the injury conspiracy that will linger for years.
He took a good chunk of that, whatever money he had
I
last
heard
year.
I heard north of 1 million just for him
Yeah,
for
right.
8 games.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like you're going to have 5 million that can be not nepotistically distributed this year,
Yeah.
which I think will, we hit on a few guys and had enough just thanks to the heroic efforts of Javon Small this year to carry a team to 19 wins. Where I think,
Should have made a
if you
tournament.
build out a more equitable roster, if you do get hit with the injury bug the way that the team got hit this year, I think Ross Hodge will be able to build a more well-rounded injury
A deeper team.
protected roster.
Yeah. I mentioned this to you the other night, and I said it when the coaching search around the middle of the coaching search. I just said the options aren't there. Like this isn't like last year where last year we had a deep pool. I mean, there was DeVries, there was Dusty May, there was Mark Byington, there was Pat Kelsey, and all those guys went to different, bigger schools and did well at those schools.
All did well across the board.
Yes, but this cycle we didn't have those guys. Like the top guy was arguably Ben McCollum, who had been a D1 coach for 1 year, but obviously his resume at the D2 level was quite impressive.
It's a similar thing to where, your two top coaches in this cycle, if you want to put Hodge in that kind of that top 5 tier of like just the candidates that were available, it's guys with success, but not at the level that they are at,
Yeah.
North Texas, is a good program at the level that they are, coaching at junior college. And it's something where, a lot of West Virginia fans were, when the pool felt like it had, kind of fallen out from under our feet a little bit, where, McCollum's relationship with Ren Baker was like, okay, we don't have to worry about it. We got the number 1 guy again this year.
Yeah.
And that, that didn't materialize, but I think mostly because of, Iowa lucking into where Ben McCollum's hometown was.
Yeah.
And I think that was a little bit of a bigger piece than a lot of people realize, that home is home. And so I think that was the issue there. And so then when you got into like, okay, well, who can we get? Who's still out there? Because we can't sit on an interim, like, and then Chester Frazier was a name that a lot of current and former players, even that didn't play, under him at all, was a name that a lot of guys were looking for. And, I've seen a lot of people say that should be forget calling players. Your first call as Ross Hodge needs to be, convincing Chester Frazier to stay as the associate head coach if you don't have a guy already in mind because of his recruiting prowess. Pretty much all of the top tier recruits that we had coming in or the transferred in last year, it's Sincere Harris and Hansberry coming in from Illinois with Frazier. Brandon Hawthorne, the number one recruit in the state of West Virginia for 2025, was asked out, but is not ruling out West Virginia from anything that I've read. But the lead recruiter on that was Chester Frazier, where, his ability to connect with players is a guy that you need if you're going to turn a program around quickly. And I think, DeVries' scheme worked well. But I think if Chester Frazier is not the associate head coach, I don't think that we win 19 games this year.
Yeah. Anyway, you make a lot of really good points, and I do want to touch up on some of those. But the point I was trying to make is I don't know where this search really began. We can all say that it probably started with McCollum, but if you listen to Grant McCaslin's interview with 365 Sports, he goes on to say it was either 365 or someone else. He goes on to say that Ben McCollum's dream job was Iowa, and Iowa was open. And I wonder if there was already kind of an agreement when Ren Baker reached out, like, "Hey, I love you, dude, but I'm already heading to Iowa." Same with Nico Medved going home to Minnesota, where he's from Minneapolis, played at Minnesota. There was a rumor that there was already a handshake deal. Like, I genuinely wonder if Ren figured that out very early in the process and said, okay, now we're to a point where I'm gonna give a courtesy interview to Jared Calhoun. If he wows me, I'll go with him. But I'm probably gonna have to reach for somebody. And this happens in the NFL quite a bit, where the top guys are off the board, and there are only 3 head coaches off, top guys ready to be a head coach, the league deems, but there are 6 openings, and these 3 other jobs have to make a call. And they basically, I think what I'm trying to get to is I think Ren Baker had to project and say, I think this guy's going to be near the top of the market in a year or 2, but we got to pull the trigger now. We can't afford to wait.
Well, and I think too, that's where, Ren Baker's nature is like, when you kind of get backed into a corner a little bit, you go on instinct and you go on what's familiar. And so I think that 5+ year run where they were both at North Texas, that Ren Baker being a basketball aficionado, they talked a good bit of ball.
Yeah.
And Ren Baker knows ball. And you and I, like, we have several people where, like, we know our friends and our connections that just know different things, and what their understanding level is and their comprehension and their talent. Where if, like, you needed the 2 of us, we got to find a basketball coach out of our contacts list today. We can pick out, like, hey, this is somebody we know well. I know that we've talked a lot of ball. This guy can probably do it. He just needs the resources in place to make sure that he isn't hindered in growth. And so that's where I think when he goes back, same thing he had to do. Don Pletsawhite, women's coach, goes back to the Midwest after a year. Ren Baker spending a big chunk of his development in kind of Missouri, Texas, goes back and pulls Mark Kellogg out of Stephen F. Austin and, finds a guy that he understood could do it and that he was familiar with. And I think one of the other
women's
things,
basketball coach at West Virginia, for those listening.
And I think the one thing that maybe not a lot of people realized, where maybe it wasn't what disqualified Calhoun fully, wasn't maybe necessarily the Bob Huggins connection, but Ren Baker's made it incredibly clear with the coaches that he has hired that defense is going to be the calling card.
I wanted to bring that up about Calhoun. Yeah.
Very offensively driven, not poor on the defensive end, but that's not where they hang their hat, where, like, you have, West Virginia women, arguably one of the 5 best defensive teams in the entire country over the last couple of years. And, he's trying to replicate that. And, DeVries, everyone thought was going to be kind of this, we're going to be this offensive juggernaut. And that really wasn't, like, that was what DeVries kind of in the mid-major level had kind of just had offensive teams, but they played defense.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where maybe Calhoun got that knock that was kind of that secondary thing to really disqualify him. Donors be damned.
Yeah. So for those wondering, Jared Calhoun, former played at Cincinnati, I believe, under Bob Huggins, coached under Bob Huggins early on at West Virginia. So there's a strong connection there to Huggins, who I honestly think the fans are pretty split on there. I think there's a very tiny fraction that would want to bring him back as head coach.
It's a very
Or
vocal, tiny fraction, but
yeah, very
very,
vocal.
very
I
small
agree.
numbers.
Yeah, but very like I think most fans are like no, like it was time to move on. Um, and it was just unfortunate the way it happened. But Calhoun, awfully close to Huggins. You've mentioned that a couple times. Like I think that really held him back. I don't think he was a real serious candidate, but I think Wren was willing to listen to him, and he just didn't wow him in the interview. And I don't think he probably gave a good reasoning for his defensive background. Like his teams defensively just haven't been that good. Um, and I was lukewarm on Calhoun. I think I like Hodge a little bit more, and I'm lukewarm on Hodge. I'm like, I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's somewhere in the middle. There's stuff to like. There's probably more to dislike. I like that he's a defensive guy, and as we said, Ren Baker loves defense, and at all sports, and that was one of the reasons why he wanted to bring Rich Rod back as football coach, which I don't like that either. But
Yeah.
our best defenses in the last 20 years have come under Rich Rod.
Yeah.
And he clearly made a point that I want to spend money on defense and got Zach Alley, who's a promising defensive coordinator from Oklahoma. As for Hodge, I like that he's a defensive guy. Being from Texas and seeing what like Mark Kellogg has done, being also a Texas native with the women's basketball program, I think he's going to be a good cultural fit with West Virginia. I think there's a lot of more carryover between Texas and West Virginia than Iowa and West Virginia in regards to DeVries. There was something else I was going to go with that. I like your point about Chester Frazier, who's an assistant. I'm not saying he has to keep him, but I think that would help a lot because
I think
Chester Frazier has
it's a discussion that you have to have.
strong ties to the East Coast from Maryland, recruits the East Coast hard. I mean, I would imagine he probably was behind Kelvin O.D., who I think that's how you pronounce his name, who was committed to West Virginia from Rhode Island. I don't know about Trent McLean, who is from California. And then, as we said, Braden Hawthorne. So, really good recruiter. I would look to bring him back if I was Hodge. We'll see. What other thoughts? I know I went on for a while there.
No, and I think the one, to kind of touch on your point, like the cultural fit, because I know we talked a good bit the other day about it, in that that's another like question mark, not maybe concern, but just a question mark of how he handles himself. And I know you and I are waiting on the press conference, which I believe hasn't really been announced yet, but I imagine it'll come
I assume he's sticking out the
after
NIT,
he finishes the NIT Final Four
which
run.
we speculated. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that is optics from possibly him and or West Virginia to be like, look, we hired someone with integrity, unlike Darren DeVries.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think, and that was even something that guys like Fran Fraschilla that know
I
Hodge
saw
well.
that.
They're
I saw
like,
that tweet.
this guy's not going to cut and run like the last guy.
I was like, holy
And
shit.
and
He
for
just threw
somebody like
shade at
Fran
him.
Fraschilla, who likes the Big 12, like that's his league that he focuses on. But for him to put his name out there and call out DeVries in such a way,
Well,
I
he didn't
think
tag
tells
him
you
in it.
how
He didn't
much
say
that
who it
reverberated.
was, but everyone knows who he's talking about when he said that. I loved it. I was like, oh damn, dude.
But I think,
Um,
but I think to get to the cultural fit that is the little bit of like the how will it go is North Texas not a top tier brand recognition in I mean Denton, Texas. Most people probably couldn't put that on a map.
I know where it is.
And a lot of us that have spent a good bit of time in the Central Texas area can easily get there, but not many people outside of that, and particularly in Morgantown, are going
It's
to know where Denton,
basically a
Texas
suburb
is.
of Dallas.
Essentially, yeah. But you're not you're in a very big pond, and you're a very small fish. To translate
Right.
that to then coming and being name recognition in the state of West Virginia goes as follows: football head coach, basketball head coach, governor.
Yeah,
That's the top three. And you're
I
ahead
agree.
of the governor. Like, and arguably even like the women's basketball coach is neck and neck with the governor these days. So like that's the company that you're keeping, that you're the face of 1.7 million people 3 months out of the year. That's the level of scrutiny that you have. And there's not even an iota of character concern with Ross Hodge from anybody.
Yeah.
Fantastic human being, great father, great husband. Everyone is happy to tell you that. So, like, that's not the concern. It's the level of scrutiny that you get on decision making and play calling and how the team's doing. Like, that pressure of being the face of a state is something that some people can handle, some people can't.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. This is a bold move, I dare say, by Ren Baker. Um,
And I think to touch on something that we like, you and I tangented on heavily this week is Ren Baker. This is kind of his line in the sand of like still establishing himself as the decision maker for West Virginia
yeah.
athletics, because Rich Rod probably wasn't his number one pick going into it. So
I
like
don't
that was
think
a decision
so.
where like
No.
the donors said, it's the point that you made the other day. The donors said, we got so much money, you can't make any other decision. We're gonna
Or
put
we're
so much
willing
money
to
into the
offer so
program.
much money. Yeah.
And so I think that was a decision where he's like, okay, like he was somebody I would consider, and at the level of money that we need to compete, if I've got the money coming in and he was already a guy I'd think about, like it kind of tilts the scales a little bit. But then when you come into basketball, and like we've talked about, Ren Baker knows ball. That's his thing. You're not going to be able to steamroll him into a Calhoun or even maybe a Crutchfield from West Liberty that maybe be successful, maybe not, but just like who donors are clamoring for. He's like, no, I know ball. I'm going to make this decision. And you and I have talked about, and it's not a secret at any level. People may get skittish, or they may not. Like, they may revolt in the off season. But you start out 8-0, 9-1. You look good. Those checks start coming right back, because what people
That
they
was a
may
point
not, if
I
it's not
made.
their idea, they may not like it. But once that idea starts working, the bankrolls are there.
That's a point I made earlier in the week. Was with all due respect, fuck the donors. Like, make the decision of who you want. That's why I really don't like bringing Rich Rod back, because it genuinely felt like he was strong armed to do it by the donors. And when that became official, I was like, I just lost a lot of respect for Ren Baker. Now I've cooled off on that. I was a little emotional in the moment, but I don't think Ren Baker had any other choice. Not necessarily that he was being strong armed. I think it was they're offering to
The
give
totality of
too
the
much money.
circumstances.
Yeah. And it wasn't a very good coaching pool. There wasn't really a candidate at the group of five level or a hot coordinator that was like, we have to get that guy.
Right.
Um, it was a mediocre pool. North Carolina was the best job on the market. They hired Bill Belichick. So I've become a little more understanding about the Rich Rod decision, even though I still hate it. But Hodge, like you said, I hope he told the donors to fuck off. No, we did it your way last time. And this is all leverage. We did it your way back in December. We're doing it my way with basketball. And when if/when Rich Rod doesn't work out, all right, we're running out of time. But if/when Rich Rod doesn't work out, the next time around, it's going to be, we did it your way last time. We're going to do it my way now.
Yeah, and then so I think it's like I said, drawing a line in the sand. This is my decision. This is my athletic department. If it doesn't work out, then fire me.
Yeah.
That's what I think. This is like like I think we talked about this the other day. Ren Baker, not a gravitas bravado kind of decision maker, but he's been put in this position a few different times now, having to make the amount of hires that he has. And so then when you get that where he's like, no, I'm in charge. I'm the man. I'm going to make the decision. And if you don't like it, take it up with me later if it doesn't work out. But this is my decision.
Yeah. We'll see if it works out. I don't think this is a home run. You called it a bunt the other night. I don't even think it's that. I think this is a single with Hodge. It doesn't excite me. It wasn't someone I said no to originally when the search began. I remember my brother sending a list of names, and I said, there were some I said, hard pass. One of them being Jared Calhoun. I said, hard pass. Others, I
Yeah.
said, hard pass. McCollum, I was like, yes. I don't even remember if Medved was on the list the first time, and I was
He
like,
might have been close. And then like another name that was an 11th hour that ended up taking a different job is Little Patino.
yeah,
But
that was
that was still
originally a
another one where
no
it
for
was
me or a pass for me. And then, 11th hour, I was like, fuck it, let's go for it. And
right. But
but
I
Hodge
think
was
it's
never
like
one of those guys for me. He
like
was always a
consistency.
go ahead.
Yeah, consistency, I think, was what Ren Baker was looking for after you get burned by DeVries in
Yeah.
11 years and 2 weeks. After he said, I can't wait to stay for decades. It's the coach of Morgantown. But, he was looking
Fuck
for
Jaron
somebody that
DeVries.
wasn't going to cut and run, as Fran Fraschilla would say. And so when you had the understanding that anybody like us that's going to read into it, but Tino's not a 10-year hire.
Yeah.
He would always peripheral what's next. Like he was never like he was a 3 to 5 year hire. And so I think when you get a guy like Ross Hodge, that if he works out, is a 5 to 10 year hire.
Yeah. I
And so I
agree with
think
you.
that was a big decision point in that is like, Mark Kellogg's not leaving anytime soon. I don't
Hope
foresee.
not.
I don't. Yeah, I was like we both like done incredibly well. Saban's in baseball program doing incredibly well to start the season. Not a guy that's going to leave anytime soon. And so I think that's where Baker's made several decisions that most ADs make once or twice in a tenure, and he's had to make 4 or 5 in a little over 2 years. Where like he's like, I'm tired of being up on the podium. Y'all don't want to talk to me. I want you to talk to coaches so I can just run the athletic department instead of coaching searches.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it. He showed up in around November of 2022. He's had to hire 3 basketball coaches, a football coach, a women's basketball coach, and let's throw the baseball
Yeah,
hire
so that's
in
a very
there.
transitory hire, but and we talked a little bit the other night of that I'm very high on Saban's with some of the connections in the baseball program that I have, knowing his mindset, and it's worked out with a weak non-conference schedule, mind you, but one of the better starts in the last 4 decades for baseball, which we've had weak non-conference schedules before and didn't win as many games. So you kind of take that for what you will. That we're set up for success across the board, and that's where we talk about dismissing the opinions of the donors. Ren Baker doesn't seem to miss. It's something that you and I talked about with the DeVries hire last year. It mildly worked out, and we just got burned by a bad human being.
Yeah.
But like that's where like that's the level of like name a bad hire that Ren Baker's made in the last 10 years.
He
You're not
hasn't
going to
really made a
find
football hire. And you
right,
can be that's my concern with him is you can be as good as you want in basketball, but football pays the bills.
right, and like that's the concern. And I think on both the Rich Rod hire, like I've been a couple degrees warmer on that hire from the very beginning than you have been. That both of these hires that have been made in the last 4 months are wait and see hires.
Yeah.
Does it work out? And if it does, it's probably going to work out spectacularly. But if it doesn't work out, then you start having deeper and deeper questions and where does the money go? And it's really easy, as easy it is in the NIL era to turn rosters and programs around faster than it ever has been. If the money dries up and the wins aren't there, it's just as easy to go back down the hill. And so I think that's the concern of like, you got to work out and you got to work out fast.
Yeah.
If Rich Rod wins 5 games this year,
That's gonna be inexcusable.
that's where
I
it's
don't
like,
give a shit that it's an overhauled roster. The amount of money they've sunk into that program, that's inexcusable.
exactly, where it's like you've got to win dead minimum 7, dead
Yeah.
minimum. And the same for Ross Hodge. I'm not saying that like he's he's on a short leash at all because I think Baker has a longer leash for
Yeah,
basketball
I think he's
coaches.
got a longer leash.
But I think if Ross Hodge comes in, poo poos the bed, wins 8 games or 10 games, it's like, oh, we missed. We're in trouble. But
I
I
won't be
think the
ready to say that, but
expectation,
yeah.
the expectation was 20 wins in the NCAA tournament, with DeVries, assuming the roster stayed healthy and that they didn't cut and run in January. So I think Hodge with a full roster, I think 18 to 22 wins is not out of the question. If it works out, and I think 15 wins is going to give people some concern. But I really think after diving in, like the defensive nature, yeah, he's a 3-and-D coach. 38% as a team with North Texas this year shooting the three. It's not their calling card, but that's how they score, which sometimes doesn't really lead well in tournament situations. But, he helped McCaslin win an NIT at North Texas in the Final Four. Like, they score enough to win,
Yeah.
which is the best teams that West Virginia's had in the last, really over the course of the entire program. We've never been an outscore you program in the history of West Virginia basketball, even back, the Jerry West days when we had some, the logo that's putting up 30 a night. We were still playing defense. The games weren't in the hundreds. The games were in the 70s.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where you get, can we find enough shooters? And I think with the NIL war chest that we've got, there's 1,000 guys already or 1,200 in the portal, a record again this year. There's a lot of shooters and a name that is not gonna it's gonna get a lot of.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you real quick while you're clearly searching. We have 2 minutes left before this thing ends, so I don't think we have time. All I want to say, I hate to end on this note, but Hodge was always a guy that I said it wasn't a pass. It wasn't a let's go get him. It was a maybe, but I don't think it's the right time. And I still don't think it is the right time. But I don't think Ren Baker is much of a choice. Like I said, I think he had to project someone who might be a hot name 1, 2, maybe 3 years from now. So we'll see. We have exactly
Isaac
about a
McNeely.
minute. Isaac McNeely, yeah.
Isaac
We have
McNeely,
about a
West
minute
Virginia
and a
native,
half.
good shooter. Like that's the kind of guys that you need to be going after that are going to play defense and also score. And I think that if everybody just gives Hodge time, I think this is a good hire. It may not feel like it's a fantastic hire until maybe we're in the 2027 Elite Eight or something. Maybe that happens. Hopefully, it does.
Yeah. All right. We got about a minute. Anything else we need to touch up on in a minute? Fuck Darren DeVries. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, that was one of the lowest.
Oh, sorry. And Tucker DeVries.
Yeah, one of the lowest character decisions I think you've seen from a head coach in a long time.
And there
Especially
was
the way
nothing
that
from
he
his
handled his press
background that would make
conference
you think
last
he was
year.
going to do that.
No one saw it coming, and I think that's where like you really question someone's character the first time they have an opportunity to do something, and they do that.
Yeah. Fuck Darren DeVries. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Dylan, I appreciate you coming on. Next time we have you on, we won't be time limited.
No, we will take care of things.
All right, my man. I'll let you go. Later.
Yep.